The night I was erased. I still remember the sound of that rain, the kind that falls like a confession. It was the night I realized I had been written out of my own bloodline. My mother's voice, calm yet cold, floated through the hallway of our family home like an echo I was never meant to hear. "Let's finalize it tonight," she said to my father. "We'll leave everything to Claire and Michael. Avery doesn't need our help. She made her choices." Avery. That was me. Their firstborn. The one who once carried their pride like a crown. I stood outside their study door, heart trembling against my ribs. The lawyer's briefcase rested open on the table, pages spread like an autopsy of love. I wasn't just being cut out of a will. I was being erased from their legacy. Every memory, every Sunday dinner, every whispered, "We're proud of you," had just been buried beneath their signatures. I wanted to scream, but silence felt heavier, more dignified. So I turned away and walked down the long, dim hallway of the house I grew up in. The smell of oak and old photographs chasing me. That night, I didn't cry. I packed my things and left without a word. They didn't stop me. The rain followed me to the bus stop, and I took it as a sign. The world mourning with me, washing away the last traces of who I used to be. For years, I had lived for their approval. I had gone to college on their terms, dated people they approved of, and followed a path they built for me. But somewhere along the way, I started dreaming of my own kind of empire. Not one made of inheritance or comfort, but of grit, silence, and purpose. That night, when I stepped into that rain-soaked street with a single suitcase and $42 in my pocket, something in me broke, and something else, something harder, was born. The following months blurred into survival. I worked at a diner in Chicago, serving coffee to people who never looked up from their phones. The city was merciless but fair. It didn't care who your parents were. For the first time, I liked that. Every tip felt like a small rebellion. Every sunrise was a victory they didn't witness. There were nights when loneliness hit like a freight train. I'd sit by my apartment window, a cracked pane overlooking an alley, and watch the city lights flicker. I promised myself that someday, I would own one of those towers. Not to prove them wrong, but to remind myself that I could exist and thrive without permission. Years passed. I learned to listen more than speak, to plan more than boast. I studied business by day, coded at night, and built connections in places no one thought to look. Every failure became a blueprint. Every rejection a map. Meanwhile, my family's name continued to gleam in the newspapers. Charity galas, luxury vacations, new properties. I stayed invisible, intentionally. I didn't need their world anymore. I was building my own. But the silence became my weapon. People underestimate what you can build when no one's watching. Then one day, 6 years after the night I left, an envelope arrived at my apartment. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's. The paper smelled faintly of home. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single line, written in his familiar, commanding script. "Avery, it's time we talk. No explicación. No apology." Just a summons, as if I'd been waiting all along. But this time, I wasn't coming back as their daughter. I was coming back as something they never expected. A woman who had already built her empire in silence. The return they never saw coming. The letter sat on my desk for 3 days before I touched it again. I had built an entire world since the night I walked away. A quiet empire stitched together with sleepless nights, risk, and refusal to break. My company, Avelis, had grown from a one-bedroom startup into a name whispered in boardrooms and tech circles. We designed data systems for corporations who thought only men could lead revolutions. They learned my name quickly. Avery Caldwell, the woman who built storms and sold them peace. No one knew where I came from. That anonymity was my shield. Until that envelope arrived. It was strange how my father's handwriting could still paralyze me. Bold, deliberate, as if each letter carried a judgment. I used to chase that approval. Now I stared at it like a relic of another life. On the 4th day, I called the number written beneath his signature. The voice that answered wasn't his. It was Claire's, my younger sister, the golden child who had inherited both their fortune and their faith. Her tone was polished, cautious. "Avery? Dad's been asking for you. He's not well." I felt a chill crawl through the silence between us. When? I asked. Soon, she said. It's complicated. Just come home. Home. The word felt foreign now. But part of me, the part still haunted by the girl at that bus stop in the rain, knew this confrontation was inevitable. So I went. The drive to my parents' estate in Connecticut felt surreal. The same iron gates, the same manicured hedges, the same house that once felt like the center of the universe. Only this time, I wasn't arriving as a daughter. I was arriving as someone who had built her own kingdom far beyond their walls. The housekeeper opened the door, eyes widening slightly as she recognized me. Miss Avery, she whispered, like saying my name might wake ghosts. Inside, the house smelled of wealth and old wood. But beneath it, there was something else. Decay. Time had dulled the shine. My father was in the library, where it had all begun. The last time I stood there, he had erased me from his life. Now he looked smaller, his face thinner, eyes dimmed by something more than illness. Avery, he said softly, like he wasn't sure if I was real. I didn't sit. I didn't hug him. I waited. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please. He sat. For a long time, there was only the ticking of the clock between us. A sound that felt like time mocking everything we'd lost. Finally he spoke. I made a mistake. Those 4 words should have healed something in me. But instead they burned. He talked about regrets, about how he'd let pride dictate everything. How Claire and Michael had turned the inheritance into chaos. How the empire he built was crumbling from within. He wanted me back, not as a daughter, but as a savior. The irony almost made me laugh. The same man who once told me I didn't need help was now asking for mine. I built my own, I said quietly. He frowned. Your own what? Empire. His expression faltered, pride and disbelief colliding. For a moment, the room went still. The power he once held over me vanished. I realized then, he needed me more than I ever needed him. When I stood to leave, he reached for my hand. Avery, we can rebuild this together. I looked at him, the man who once defined me, now small against his own legacy. I already did, I said. Just not with you. As I walked out, Claire appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were cold, calculating. You think you're better than us now? She hissed. I didn't answer. Some wars don't need words, only silence. Outside, the rain had started again just like that night years ago. Only this time, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking towards something much bigger. Because revenge doesn't always come in fury or fire. Sometimes, it comes wrapped in grace, and silence loud enough to shake the walls of those who once underestimated you. But as I reached my car, I saw someone waiting in the shadows near the gate. A figure I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. And when they stepped forward, everything I thought I knew about my family, and the betrayal that started it all, began to unravel. The secret they tried to bury. The rain hit the gravel like 1,000 whispered warnings as I stepped closer to the figure waiting by the gate. For a second, I thought it was one of my father's staff, maybe a guard or an old friend. But then the lightning cracked above us, and I saw him. Michael. My brother. The one who used to call me Ace when we were kids, who swore he'd always protect me, until the day he stood beside my parents and signed my name out of the will. He looked older now. Sharper. The playboy confidence was gone, replaced by a quiet desperation. Avery, he said, voice trembling. You shouldn't have come. I didn't answer right away. The wind pulled at my coat, the rain soaking through the silence between us. I wasn't exactly invited, I said finally. He glanced back toward the house, eyes darting like someone watching shadows move. It's not what you think. I almost laughed. It never is it? Michael stepped closer, the porch light catching the tension in his face. Dad's sick, but that's not why he called you. There's something else, something you don't know. I folded my arms. You'll have to do better than cryptic warnings. I've had enough secrets for a lifetime. He hesitated. It's about Mom. That name, that one word, froze everything inside me. My mother had been the architect of my exile. Her approval was the currency in our family, and I had stopped earning it the day I chose independence over obedience. What about her? I asked. Michael's throat tightened. She's been hiding something. For years. You were cut out of the will because of her. Not Dad. A chill ran through me. You're lying. I wish I was. He pulled something from his pocket, a folded letter, yellowed with age. I found this after she passed. Passed? I hadn't even known. I took the letter with shaking hands. It was addressed to Evelyn, my mother's name, in my father's handwriting. But when I unfolded it, the signature at the bottom wasn't his. It was from a name I didn't recognize, Thomas Hale. The words blurred in the rain, but the message was clear enough to steal my breath. She deserves the truth, Evelyn. She deserves to know where she really came from, before it's too late. I looked up, heart pounding. Who is this? Michael looked down. I don't know everything, but I think he's your real father. The world seemed to tilt. The rain, the thunder, even my heartbeat, all dissolved into one long, ringing silence. I staggered back, the letter trembling in my hands. You're saying? I'm saying you were never meant to be erased, Avery, he interrupted. You were never one of them to begin with. The pieces began to click together. My mother's coldness, my father's strange distance, the way they had always treated me like a guest in my own home. I had thought it was because I disappointed them. But maybe it was because I wasn't theirs to begin with. Michael stepped closer. Dad doesn't know that I found the letter. If he did, he'd destroy it. Whatever this truth is, it's buried deep, and if you dig it up, you might not like what you find. I folded the paper carefully, my fingers steady despite the storm inside me. That's the thing about truth, I said quietly. It doesn't care if you like it. He nodded, rain running down his face. Then be careful, Ace. This family doesn't forgive, and they definitely don't forget. As he walked away, disappearing into the fog, I stood there under the cold rain, the letter clutched against my chest, my reflection shimmering in the puddles like a stranger. I had spent years building an empire in silence, trying to prove my worth to the people who abandoned me. But maybe the real betrayal had started long before the will. Maybe I wasn't erased from the family. Maybe I was never part of it at all. And deep down, a terrifying thought began to grow. If my mother went this far to bury my truth, what else had she destroyed to keep it hidden? I turned toward my car, the letter burning in my hand like a confession waiting to detonate. It was time to find out who Thomas Hale really was, and what my mother had done to keep him a secret. The man who knew too much. Sleep was impossible that night. The letter lay on my nightstand, illuminated by the soft glow of the city beyond my penthouse window. My empire stretched across that skyline, glass towers and contracts, code and capital. Yet in that moment, I felt like a stranger inside everything I had built. Who was Thomas Hale? I had searched every corner of my mind for the name, but it was as if he had been erased, just like me. By morning, my instincts had taken over. I called my assistant, a woman named Mara, who had helped me build Avelis from the ground up. She didn't ask questions when I gave her the name. She just said, "Give me a few hours." By noon, she had a file waiting on my desk. It was thin, but it was enough to split open a past I never knew I had. Thomas Hale, a financial analyst from Boston. Brilliant, quiet, and missing since 1998. The same year I was born. My heart pounded as I flipped through the sparse records. One photo remained, a black and white headshot clipped from an old university archive. The resemblance was haunting. The same jawline. The same sharp eyes I had never shared with my supposed father. Mara's voice broke my trance. "Avery, you okay?" I nodded slowly. "Find out what happened to him." She hesitated. "There's something else. The company he worked for, it was one of your family's subsidiaries. Caldwell Financial." I froze. Of course. The same empire my parents had built. The one that funded the mansion, the cars, the legacy. And maybe the lies. I drove to Boston that evening, tracing a past I never lived. The old building where Thomas Hale once worked was now a co-working space, filled with startups and coffee machines. But tucked deep in its basement archives, I found what I was looking for. A box marked 1998. Personnel records, Caldwell Financial. Inside were files, faded memos, and a handful of internal letters. One of them bore my mother's signature. Terminate Thomas Hale's contract immediately. Ensure all records of his involvement are expunged. Non-disclosure enforced. And at the bottom, in pen, my father's initials. My throat tightened. They had destroyed him. Erased him from existence. Why? I didn't have time to process it before I heard footsteps behind me. A man's voice echoed through the empty hall. You shouldn't be here, Miss Caldwell. I turned, security guard mid-50s, watching me carefully. His name tag read R. Matson. I started to explain, but he raised a hand. You're looking for Hale, aren't you? I froze. You knew him. He hesitated, then nodded. Everyone here did. Quiet guy. Smart. But he got involved with someone he shouldn't have. His gaze was steady. Your mother. The room felt colder. She was married back then, he continued. But I guess that didn't stop them. When she found out she was pregnant, things got ugly. Then one day, Thomas just vanished. No one saw him again. The silence pressed in like a storm. Do you think she? He shook his head. I don't know what she did. But whatever happened, it scared everyone enough to stay quiet. The Caldwells had power. And money can make ghosts out of people. My pulse thudded in my ears. My entire life had been built on lies. My last name, my exile, even my silence. I had spent years punishing myself for being unwanted, never realizing the truth was far darker. I was living proof of their sins. When I stepped back outside, the city felt foreign. My mother had orchestrated everything. My erasure, my exile, even the silence around my own bloodline. But if she thought burying Thomas Hale would bury me too, she was wrong. I had built an empire from nothing. Now, I would use that empire to uncover everything. That night, I opened a private investigation. Every resource, every connection, every dollar I had, redirected toward one goal. Finding what happened to Thomas Hale. And 2 weeks later, at 3:47 a.m., Mara called. Her voice was trembling. Avery, we found him. I sat up, heart hammering. Alive. A pause. Yes. But you're not going to believe where. The father I never knew. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The words, we found him alive, echoed in my head like a heartbeat refusing to fade. Thomas Hale. My real father. The ghost buried under my mother's lies, alive. Mara's voice trembled through the phone. He's in Maine. Living under another name. He runs a small community library in a town called Gray Harbor. A library. Not a boardroom, not a city, not a shadowed mansion. Just books and silence. Maybe that's how he'd survived. By disappearing into something simple, something no one would ever look for. By morning, I was on the road, my heart a storm of disbelief and rage, and something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The drive took 6 hours, the highway unfolding like a memory I never lived. When I reached Gray Harbor, it was exactly as I imagined. Quiet, coastal, draped in mist. I parked in front of a weathered brick building with a small sign that read Gray Harbor Public Library. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and salt. The sound of pages turning filled the space. And there, behind the counter, stood a man with silvered hair and kind, tired eyes. I knew before he even looked up. He froze when he saw me. The book in his hand slipped, thudding softly against the counter. For a moment neither of us spoke, just silence, thick with the weight of years. I think you know who I am, I said finally, my voice breaking somewhere between anger and grief. He exhaled, a tremor in his chest. Avery. Hearing my name from his mouth felt like a door opening somewhere deep inside me. He motioned for me to sit. His hands shook as he poured tea, small, human gestures that made the truth hurt even more. I wanted to come for you, he said quietly. But your mother, she made sure I couldn't. She told me she'd ruin you if I ever tried. She already did, I said. He nodded, eyes glistening. I believed her lies. That you'd be safe if I stayed away. That she'd raise you to have everything I couldn't give you. I swallowed hard. She raised me to forget who I was. For a long while we just sat there, two people bound by silence, finally breathing in the same truth. He told me about the affair, about the threats, the night he disappeared. How my mother's family paid him to vanish, rewriting history before I ever learned how to speak. I used to follow your life from afar, he confessed. I saw what you built. You didn't just survive, Avery. You became everything they feared you could be. Tears blurred my vision. Then why now? Why let me find you? He smiled sadly. Because I wanted you to know you were never unwanted. You were the only thing I ever wanted to protect. For years, I had carried rage like armor. I thought revenge was my closure. But in that tiny library, surrounded by dust and truth, I realized something bigger. Silence had built me, but love, real, quiet, unconditional love, could finally free me. When I left Gray Harbor that evening, the ocean stretched beside me like an open page. I didn't need vengeance anymore. I needed legacy. My own. 2 months later, I made the announcement. Aveli's Foundation for Hidden Voices, a fund dedicated to supporting children abandoned by wealth, erased by bloodlines, silenced by power. Every dollar, every headline, every whispered mention of my name was no longer about revenge. It was about rebirth. At the launch gala, reporters asked if my family had reached out. I smiled, calm and steady. My family didn't cut me out of their will, I said softly. They cut me out of their silence. The next morning my father, Thomas Hale, sat beside me at the foundation's office, helping unpack boxes of donated books. The past didn't vanish. It simply quieted. As sunlight poured through the tall glass windows, I looked out over the city skyline, my empire. Built from exile, forged in pain, crowned in peace. And in the distance, I could almost hear my mother's voice again. Not cruel this time, not distant. Just a faint echo carried by the wind. You made your choices. Yes, I did. And I chose to rise in silence, until silence itself spoke my name. Some empires are built from power. Mine was built from truth.